This podcast is made possible by the listener members of Nashville Public Radio.
This is the Nash Villager Podcast. It's March 26, 2026, and today is parole hearing day for a handful of Middle Tennessee residents. These hearings happen all the time. The state keeps a schedule handy on its website so you can see who's on the docket at various county parole boards. Today, there will be 3 cases up for discussion in Murray County, 1 in Rutherford, and 5 regarding people assigned to Nashville's Metro Correctional Work Center. The way these things work, the hearings generally take place in local jails. The boards may be asked to consider releasing someone currently behind bars to instead be out in the community, but under supervision of a parole officer. In some cases, they're determining whether a person broke the conditions of their parole. Other times, it's about deciding if a person isn't eligible for parole for some reason, or they may be considering an appeal to any of those other decisions. There are a lot of factors at play. Most of them have to do with the specifics of the crime a person was convicted of committing and how they behaved. But sometimes the parole board is also encouraged to keep in mind the capacity issues at the place the person will need to stay if they aren't on parole. The jail. I'm Nina Cardona, and this is your daily digest of what's happening around Middle Tennessee with context from Nashville Public Radio, WPLN News. We all know that Middle Tennessee's population has grown a lot in recent decades, and that's put pressure on a lot of public facilities and infrastructure. More people means we need more roads, more schools, more trash collectors. The hospitals need to be bigger, and so do the jails. It's something we're seeing at multiple places around the Midstate right now. Local governments deciding it's time to pull together the money to make more room for law enforcement to hold people in custody. Last week, Williamson County officially broke ground on what's being called the Jail, Justice, and Juvenile Campus. The first thing to be built will be a juvenile center. Technically, we don't call those jails for a lot of reasons, but they are the closest thing to a jail that we have for kids who get in trouble with the law. Later on, the campus will also include the juvenile court and a jail for adult offenders. Altogether, Williamson County has issued $280 million in bonds to pay for the campus. Right now in Nashville, Metro officials are requesting proposals from contractors interested in building a $410 million jail complex. The idea is that the old Metro Detention Facility, which has been closed since 2020, and the Correctional Development Center for Men, which is currently over capacity, would be torn down and replaced with a new structure on the same property, over on Harding Place. Once finished, it would add capacity for around 1,000 more people than can be held in custody right now. Now, if you're someone who pays a lot of attention to the news or to the local justice system, a question may be springing to mind. Didn't Nashville just open a new detention center a few years ago? Yes, it did. That's the downtown detention center. But Metro has multiple facilities around the county. One aging one has been replaced. Now it's time to do the same on another site. And because that Harding Place detention facility has been closed for a while, the Sheriff's Department has been pinched to find places to keep people. Officials say this project would bring the county back into line with a number of beds that should be available. Meanwhile, overcrowding in the Rutherford County Jail has become a serious problem that threatens to boil over to a crisis if something isn't done soon. The county commission recently allocated money to start planning for a new jail, but they're still at the very start of the process. Whoever wins the current contract will be laying preliminary groundwork, finding a site, getting the ball rolling on a design, that kind of stuff. They're still a long ways from building anything. It could take 5 years or so before they have a new jail. But in the meantime, the current one is so full that it risks decertification. If the county doesn't move fast enough, some officials have warned the federal government could swoop in, build a new jail for the county, and then send them the bill. That would almost certainly cost much, much more than if the local government handles everything. So beyond building a new jail, they have to find better solutions for dealing with people convicted of crimes in the meantime. Which brings things all the way back around to parole. Upping the percentage of people convicted of crimes who are put on supervised release takes the pressure off of very full jails. At a recent forum, candidates for Rutherford County Sheriff made the point that whoever is tapped for that position is going to have to work closely with the county's judges to make good use of jail alternatives, like parole, to protect against further overcrowding. In just a few minutes, a figure skating legend who now makes Middle Tennessee his home. That's coming up after the newscast.
I'm music and culture reporter Justin Barney, and I like doing weird stories. And because we're funded by listeners, I get to do weird stories, and you get to hear them. Like last year, I did this story about the Lost Wave community on Reddit and how one of their users in the Middle East tracked down a song that was put on a mixtape 2 decades ago and thought to be lost to time, but it was actually made by a bartender in Nashville when he was 18 years old. Keep weird stories alive by supporting public radio at WPLN.org.
Here's the latest from WPLN News. Tennessee gave more than $850,000 to local sheriffs and police departments last year for immigration enforcement. That's according to a report obtained by the Tennessee Lookout. It details how Chief Immigration Enforcement Officer Ryan Hubbard recruited more local law enforcement agencies to assist ICE through a program that gives local officers some immigration enforcement powers. The report says Hubbard had to combat, quote, false information about the program from people who oppose ICE, but that it didn't ultimately impede his efforts. Only 2 local agencies had signed an official agreement with ICE before the state began offering incentives. There are now more than 60. Law enforcement agencies across Tennessee could soon be required to partner with ICE under a proposal advancing in the State House. WPLN's Mariana Bacallao reports.
Last year, lawmakers offered incentives for law enforcement that partner with ICE. Now they want to make that mandatory. Democratic Senator Jeff Yarbrough opposed the bill, pointing to the Davidson County Sheriff's Office, which ended its agreement with ICE after a woman in its custody spent hours shackled while in labor.
That ended up being a significant financial expenditure for the city. The cities and counties are the ones who are open to that liability.
The bill's sponsor, Republican Senator Jack Johnson, brought the measure as part of a broader collaboration with the White House.
We have a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity right now, given what is taking place at the federal level in the Trump administration.
The Tennessee Sheriff's Association testified that they were neutral on the bill, which now moves closer to a Senate floor vote. Mariana Bacallao, WPLN News.
Tennessee may become home to the nation's nuclear trash. Earlier this year, the U.S. Department of Energy asked states to volunteer to store leftovers from the nuclear power industry. WPLN's Caroline Eggers reports.
The federal government has been pushing for a single location for nuclear waste since the 1980s. And energy advocates still think it's a good idea. The difference now is that Tennessee is in the running to house it. Some state leaders are already on board. Senator Ken Yeager sponsored a resolution in support. He says the state is a prime location for a repository, given the nuclear development already happening in East Tennessee.
This is a significant opportunity to generate billions of private dollars in Tennessee and create thousands of jobs statewide.
His resolution pledges the legislature to take any necessary action to ensure Tennessee is selected as the host location. Caroline Eggers, WPLN News.
No Tennessee projects were picked in the Boring Company's contest to have the company build a short tunnel pro bono. But a social media post from Elon Musk's firm says it may still try to excavate a utility tunnel in Hendersonville. That was one of 3 proposals in the state that were named as contest finalists. The competition is separate from the 13-mile tunnel the Boring Company is currently digging to connect Nashville's airport to the city's downtown. Despite the high temperatures and sun outside, January's ice storm is still on the minds of many Nashvillians. That was evident this week during an episode of This is Nashville, when Mayor Freddie O'Connell fielded questions from listeners. Some asked about remaining debris, and others asked about costs incurred during hotel stays, like Pam in Forest Hills.
During the ice storm, many of us had to get into a hotel room for extended periods, and that was pricey enough. But then as we were checking out, we noticed all the occupancy taxes and all that kind of stuff that just felt like it was, kind of adding salt to the wound.
Pam asked if the city could waive the occupancy tax, which is typically intended to shift some of the tax burden to tourists. O'Connell said something like this is unlikely due to the state regulating most tax relief. However, he said he liked the idea and would float it to the General Assembly. The mayor also pointed to the types of relief the city is providing, such as limited Metro water credits and the Winter Storm Recovery Fund. Well, communication was clearly one of the biggest failures in Nashville Electric Service's response to Winter Storm Fern. But a new review presented to the Utilities Board yesterday outlines other areas where the power provider fell short. The Tennessean reports that the NES emergency command structure left questions about who was responsible for what during the storm. Vulnerable customers were not prioritized adequately. The utility didn't line up additional storm response contracts ahead of time, making it unclear who was available to help. and NES had fallen behind on vegetation management. And as many residents already know, customer-facing services collapsed under a wave of traffic, and the timeline for restoration wasn't issued for days. NES leader Teresa Broyles-Applin says the utility is implementing fixes across the board. It's now formalized its emergency response structure, identified new high-priority facilities like nursing homes, and secured proactive contracts for linemen. She says they're also developing new tools that give more accurate restoration timelines, hiring a public information officer, and catching up on tree trimming. Broyles-Applin says the swift changes are crucial as Tennessee enters spring storm season. However, some of the improvements won't be complete until summer. Roughly 2 out of every 100 people working for Metro Nashville government aren't getting paid correctly. The city switched its payroll and pension systems to a new Oracle AI software in January. Since then, WSMV reports routing errors have prevented some paychecks and pension payments from being delivered to the bank accounts of some Metro employees and retirees. Officials say staff in the finance office have been working 7 days a week to fix those problems. You'll find more news anytime at WPLN.org. Scott Hamilton is an Olympic figure skating champion who essentially became the voice of the sport to a generation, and now he's a Middle Tennessean working to foster growth in that sport in our area. During this Fun Drive week, we're revisiting recent profile episodes of This Is Nashville. Here's part of the conversation between Hamilton and host Blake Farmer.
I found out that LA was a great place to be alone. Really great place to be alone. It's hedges and fences and walls and people live in their cars, and it's just, you can isolate there, and I needed time to heal. And so I just did that. And my choreographer and a coach was there. I'd skate and I'd work out and I'd get my new programs for the next year's tour, and I'd go tour and I'd come back to LA and I'd kind of do that. And it was, it's a very small group of people I'd hang out with, but, it was a good place to heal. And on the 3rd anniversary of my diagnosis, I'm doing a show in Memphis, and Tony Thomas, Danny Thomas's son, we were benefiting St. Jude.
I was going to say, his name's all over St. Jude.
Yeah. So we were benefiting St. Jude in my tour, and he had a guest coming to the show that night, and I was like, oh, Tony's dating. This is nice. All right, I'm going to check out Tony's date. And I saw this girl standing over by the production office, and I wanted to know what she was like. So I went over, and by then I felt like I was kind of broken and toxic, from everything. And I just wasn't interested in being in a relationship, really. And I meet this girl, and I thought it was Tony's date. And it was like, wow, holy cow, my heart just jumped a little bit. Time for me to step away. So talked to her for 10 minutes, stepped away. And I'm thinking, maybe it's time for me to, if I can, if my heart jumps like that, maybe it's time for me to start thinking about maybe getting back into the game, right? Mm-hmm. So I dismissed it, went back out on tour, playing golf with Tony. He's talking to a girl on the phone. I go, is that the girl from Memphis? And he said, Tracy? And I go, I don't know her. I don't ever know her name. And he goes, no, she's just a friend. She was just a guest. She's like a little sister. And I was like, really? And he goes, did you like her? And I go, was that a date? And he goes, no. And I go, yes. And I did like her. And so he goes, you know what? I think she's moving to LA this week. And I'm like, no way, really? And then I find out that where I play golf in LA, my favorite caddy is her first cousin.
All right. So listen, he's always looking for a sign, and the signs are lining up.
Yeah, they were lining up big time. So we went out. We connected, went out on a date, and we've been together ever since. And, wow. And on that night she met me in Memphis. She was driving back home with her cousin who went to the show with her, and just said, oh, I met Scott Hamilton backstage. And her cousin said, her cousin named Gina, and Gina says, what's he like? And she goes, that's the type of man I see myself marrying someday. And already her heart jumped, I guess, too, but I don't know. But anyway, we were dating, and we were getting to a point where it was really amazing. And it was different than anybody I've ever been with before. And she goes, I have something really important to talk to you about. And I said, you can talk to me about anything. And she goes, where are you in your relationship with Jesus? And I had to think for a second, because I believed in God. I just didn't know much about Jesus. And I did know that I wasn't interested in sort of this denominational religion that was, making people fight, over things. And I was just like, I was very honest with her. I just said, I believe in God. I pray all the time. I just don't know a lot about Jesus, but where do you want me to be?
What is the right answer here?
What is the right answer? So she goes, all right, well, this is a little different than I anticipated. So let's, can I introduce you to my pastor? And so her pastor, Ken Durham, became like, an uncle to us. He and his wife, Nancy, were amazing. And they just took us under their wing, and he helped me understand and grow my faith. And he handed me a Bible, and he said, have you ever read this before? And I go, I tried, and I just didn't get it. There was really nobody there to help me. And he goes, do you like history? And I go, I love history. It's my favorite subject in school. And he goes, it's a book of history. But don't necessarily focus on the characters. Really pay attention to how God interacted with all of them. And I was like, why didn't somebody tell me this a long time ago? So I started going to church and I started reading, and all of a sudden the dots started getting connected. All the things that I thought were random didn't feel random anymore. And just everything that, it just didn't feel like it wasn't random.
You can hear the rest of that conversation with Scott Hamilton in the This Is Nashville podcast feed. We do this roundup of Nashville news every weekday. Please consider subscribing on your favorite podcasting app. Thanks so much to all of you who've left 5 stars, a thumbs up, or a review in your app of choice. That little bit of love really does tell the algorithms that more people should hear about us. And of course, everything at WPLN News is listener supported. You can make a donation at WPLN.org. And that's it for today. Thanks so much for listening. Let's make this day a good one, and we'll catch back up tomorrow.